Yeah, we can just switch.
Yeah. So today we're going to be going over the pollution in the Mississippi River and surrounding bodies of water in the Mississippi.
Alright, so I'm sure everyone here has seen pictures like this. A whale washed up on a beach with plastic in its mouth, dead. Or a picture like these in a village or along a city, along a river, and there's just trash everywhere and no one can do anything and it just looks disgusting. And you might think to yourself, well, these are across the world or at the ocean. We're in Wisconsin, we're nowhere near ocean, this doesn't impact me. Well, I would like to encourage you to think again. There is the Mississippi River that flows right through La Crosse. That is a vital and important ecosystem that is being polluted and trashed at this very instant. So today, after hours of research, I and our group would like to introduce how the pollution started on the Mississippi, what types of pollutions there are, the effects it has on animals and the ecosystem, efforts that are being currently conducted to help with pollutions, and what you can do at home to help.
So I'm going to talk about how pollution starts and kind of like where it comes from. But first off, pollution is globally known, and I mean people know what it is, people know the effect that it has. Everyone knows that it's bad, but no one really understands how serious it really can be. So I'm going to explain to you the major types of pollution there are and what they do, how they come to be, and what they can actually do and have an effect on. So to begin, my three main types, or the three main points of pollution are land pollution, air pollution, and water pollution. So pollutants are what causes the pollution. Those are harmful materials that are introduced into the environment. They can be natural and or artificial, which just means they're man-made. So the definition of air pollution is just the mixture of solid particles and gas in the air and just what comes to be in the atmosphere. Water pollution is just the contamination of any water bodies, and land pollution is solid or liquid waste that is just on the land, either in the land or just sits on top. So air pollution is my first one, and what causes air pollution is what people use on a daily basis. So two big ones would be vehicles, and that is when your gas is getting used, or oil, and it just gets into the atmosphere through your exhaust pipe. And then the next one would be coal, when you're burning that to produce electricity for your home, to charge your phone, use a shower, just anything that you do on a daily basis. There are also some naturally occurring ways for air to be polluted. One would be the greenhouse gases, and those just occur, and those are a natural thing needed for everyday activity, but due to humans' activity, we are worsening the effect that they have on us. And some impacts that they have would be, it is harder to breathe, just because the rising temperatures and other negative impacts that come with it that I'll touch on. You can get burning eyes, and you can also get an increase in lung cancer. So according to National Geographic, the US makes about 5% of the world's population, and however we use about 25% of the world's resources. We use of the world's 25% of the coal we use, and we use about 26% of the oil, and for natural gas we use about 27%. And with air pollution, there's wind currents that occur every single day. No matter how breezy it actually is, all this pollution can travel quite fast and get from one side of the earth to the other. So my next point that I'm touching on is water pollution. And the Mississippi River carries about 1.5 million metric tons of nitrogen into the Gulf of Mexico. That's annually. And because of that, it can pollute and creates dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico about the size of New Jersey. So that happens every summer, and that affects any marine life that lives in it. So some factors for water pollution is that agriculture, obviously there's runoff due to the pesticides and herbicides or any fertilizers they use for the farmland. Another one would be the sewage and wastewater, and there is roughly about 1.2 trillion gallons of sewage just sitting out on the earth. A big patch that's in the water currently is called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and that is just sitting out in the water, and currently you can't really do much about it. Another way is oil pollution, so that is any time that we're trying to get oil, if there's a leak or a spill and oil just gets in the water. The final one that I have is radioactive substances. So that would be like a nuclear plant, or if you're mining and you get like a uranium like spill. And then along with wind currents, there's also water currents. So this water pollution can spread and go to one spot to another. So the last major pollution that I have is land pollution, and that is just the deterioration of Earth's land surfaces at and or below the ground level. Contributors to that are littering, urbanization and construction, mining, and agriculture. So littering is also obviously an issue because that's just garbage that's sitting out on this earth and just pollutes and sits there, and unless you pick it up, it's going to stay there for a bit until it decomposes. Urbanization and construction is an issue because that's bringing a new population into an area, and a lot of the materials that are used in the construction are just wasted, and if not disposed of properly, just sit there and cannot be recycled. Mining is an issue because if you mine and all of a sudden you hit like a gas leak, or you use your equipment, you're using fossil fuels to burn, or maybe you just leave like some equipment out there. Finally, agriculture is a big issue because what I've touched on already, there's pesticides and just stuff used, and the gas that is being used for the equipment.
Not only does pollution occur in the water, but it also starts on land. Dean Klinkenberg's article of the 70-year-old Mississippi River states that there are 18 million Americans who depend on drinking water from the Mississippi. This includes the 50,000 residents of the city of La Crosse. The Mississippi is the second most polluted waterway in the United States behind the Ohio River. Just 1 mile east of the river into La Crosse, there's a waste management site. 4 miles east of the river is the County of La Crosse landfill. This is very dangerous to the Mississippi of pollution because of the concerns of heavy rains and winds blowing the waste into the river. It's important to understand how pollution affects the environment and human health.
So now that we know how pollution occurs, I'm going to talk today about how it affects the animals. So the pollution in the Mississippi River affects eagles, fish, and many other birds and reptiles that we call the Mississippi home. The main pollution that these animals face is nitrogen, phosphorus, mercury, and other chemicals used in farm fields that is then washed off into the Mississippi during heavy rains and floods. These chemicals are absorbed by the fish, which are in turn then eaten by other birds of prey or other animals of prey, and then absorbed through those animals. The pollution can also have positive and negative effects, but mainly negative. The sunken ship structures and other man-made rock bars can be a haven for fish and spawning and reproductive, and also snails. But the runoffs also from the fields can also help with the algae bloom. This can be both negative and positive, as algae creates cover for frogs and other reptiles, including turtles, but it can also block the sunlight from reaching the bottom of the river, therefore killing all the seaweed and other natural habitats that's under. So as I mentioned earlier, eagles are one of the animals that are really affected by this pollution. In the 1940s, there was a new pesticide released for farmers that was being used everywhere called DDT. This killed bugs and insects that ate the crops. They killed them off really well, but it also helps kill off other animals. So during heavy rains, it flooded and washed off into the Mississippi River, and the fish absorbed that chemical, and then the eagles and other birds of prey took those fish and ate them and then absorbed them into their body. So the DDT specifically for eagles caused the eggshells to be very thin and causing the young to not be born or die thereafter being born because of the thin eggshells. This caused a rapid decline in the eagle populations, and according to the U.S. Forest Service, in 1963, there was estimated to only be 487 nesting pairs of eagles in the entire U.S. And so therefore, shortly after, in 1967, the eagles were placed on the endangered species list and DDT was banned from use. However, luckily, there has been a good recovery, and in 2006, again, according to the U.S. Forest Service, there's an estimated 9,789 mating pairs of eagles in the entire U.S., and that is continuing to rise. So luckily, we stopped the pollution before we completely made the eagles become extinct. So that was just a lesson we can learn from in the future.
So runoff from the Mississippi and everything hasn't just affected the ecosystems along the Mississippi, but also ecosystems in the ocean. So according to the Cleaner Ocean Foundation, the Mississippi carries an estimated of 1.5 million metric tons of nitrogen pollution every year into the Gulf of Mexico. Another study done by the Ocean Conservation found that the U.S. is among the top third of countries contributing to the coastal plastic pollution. In 2016, it was estimated that anywhere between 0.91 and 1.25 million metric tons of plastic was also littered into the ocean environment. So not only is the Mississippi pooling tons of chemical pollution into the oceans, but it also has tons of plastic along with it. So not only and this doesn't even count the plastic that is being put directly into the ocean instead of flowing into it through the Mississippi. So because of all of this pollution that's coming into the oceans, it causes animals like fish, seabirds, sea turtles, and marine animals to eat the plastic or become entangled and eventually die because of it. And a study done by a group of scientists linking the mortality rate of turtles and plastic debris ingestion found that about 52% of all sea turtles have ingested plastic debris. And so what happens is the turtles ingest it and then they think their stomach is full, so they don't continue eating and eventually they starve. And another study estimates that 60% of all seabirds have eaten pieces of plastic, and they predict by 2050 that this percentage will rise to 99%. So all of these animals are digesting these big amounts of plastic, which will eventually kill them or make them sick. And this destroys the ecosystems from the inside out. This pollution affects the plants, the animals, and everything. And if we lose these ocean ecosystems, the world's going to be in a lot of hurt.
So now we're going to talk about how the pollution affects the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is including all where the environment the animals live, the food chain, and all that included. So the trash that lines the shore of the Mississippi can be detrimental to the ecosystem, not only because it looks bad, but it also, the animals are tempted to eat these plastics and trash and then either pass it on to a different animal or die. So the microplastics are a big problem right now because little fish, little birds are able to eat these plastics and they continue to build up. And as Ryan said before, they feel full, so then they don't eat and actually starve. So boats are also another thing that pollute the Mississippi. The dredges and barges that move up and down the river dump oil and leak gas into it, and therefore they poison the other animals, they kill the fish, and they just leave oil slicks that every other animal can get caught up in. And also the wakes from these barges can cause extreme erosion along the banks, which is why we've had to make rock bars and plant other trees along the river.
Which is another thing. So my dad has his master's in forestry, so when I talked to him about this, he said planting trees like the silver birch and yew and elder trees, which have deep root systems, help to deal naturally with erosion, and as well they have the ability to capture the air pollution particles and naturally purify them, as well as for the more northern states, conifers like evergreens and pines are good for this same thing.
Locks and dams along the Mississippi have several different effects to our ecosystem. The closest lock and dam to the city of La Crosse is Lock and Dam number 7 in Onalaska. Meg Jones' article about Mississippi locks and dams states that there's been a request for reconstruction on this dam, as well as government funds as it's 40 years past its 50-year life expectancy. This dam was built in 1930, and during 1982 to 2002, the U.S. Corps of Engineers did heavy rehabilitation onto this dam. although it did not fully satisfy the need for the reconstructed figure. Due to this, it lowered the water temperature and the flow of water below the dams. Although having locks and dams may benefit from reducing land pollution and carbon dioxide pollution, unless specifically constructed to do so, it also prevents the passing of fish and other species for spawning up and downstream. Kevin McKenzie's article on environment effects of dams says that it affects the fish as it has a barrier for spawning, as well as it also affects the predators and prey's food chains and has limitations placed on them. For first-hand experience, I'm sure that everybody has seen at least a plastic water bottle or a piece of garbage not where it's supposed to be, such as in a garbage can. Sandesh Naroju says that 70% of everything we throw away will find its way into our local waterways. There's a river cleanup organization here in the city of La Crosse. On May 8th, they had their most recent cleanup day, and there was over 200 volunteers that participated. Since 1993, they have taken out over 710,000 pounds of trash out of the Mississippi River.
So when people think of water pollution, they oftentimes will think of what Zach talked about, like oil spills or gasoline spills, and they don't think they can do much as an individual to help. However, there's a lot of more less obvious threats to the Mississippi that people can help with. A group called the Friends of the Mississippi say things like pills, soap, salts, plastic, and even leaves can cause all different kinds of pollution. So avoiding things like microplastics, which are products found in cosmetic products, synthetic clothing, and plastic bags and plastic bottles like Lauren was talking about, as well as planting plants that are native to your region instead of planting non-native plants will help, because these non-native plants use more nutrients and more water from the ground, which causes more erosion and a lot more runoff. And another way to reduce runoff is by rigging up a rain barrel, and these rain barrels reduce the volume of the runoff going into sewers or just straight into the river. And if they go into storm sewers, they can go into neighboring lakes, rivers, and even the ocean, like I talked about before. And you might be thinking, I'm just one person, how can I do anything to help this major problem of pollution? But if a lot of people do these seemingly little things, it'll help in the long run a lot. But you're not doing it alone. There's a lot of governmental regulations and laws. But it wasn't until 1960, which is dubbed the environmental decade, that the pollution control laws really started to take shape. And the reason for this was environmental disasters, like an Ohio River fire, and also the Love Canal in New York, and what was happening to the eagles, which was also what Zach was talking about. So all these things caused the U.S. population to see there was a need for environmental regulation laws. And these type of laws take many different forms and shapes. So the federal government trusts the state government to make these own regulations and make sure that these regulations are being maintained and being kept in healthy ways, and they're trusting them to take care of their own states. And so because it's kind of up to each state, all these laws are very different, and it depends on in which state they're issued to kind of see like what regulations and kind of things are there. But one of the first statutes was the National Environmental Policy of 1969, which requires the government to consider impacts of its environmental laws in the nation. And along with this law and many other laws, it really focuses on the regulation of activities that utilize materials like the microplastics and everything like that are potentially harmful to both human health and the environment.
So in conclusion, I hope that with everything that we touched on, you know that you need to act as soon as you can just to make a difference. So all of the cause and effects, they can be reduced or limited. So I hope with what you know, all the types of pollution, the impacts on the ecosystem, and the solutions, hopefully you can go and make a difference. Thank you.